Welcome to the Brain Crops podcast. I'm Chelsea Myers, your host, with a mission to lift and support 100 million people in accessing their truth. In relation to that mission, I'm the creator of Quantum Upgrade Personal Transformation, a program that supports people in overcoming their habit with pornography. And through that project, we're involved in demand reduction and supporting rescued trafficked children. I am very excited about today's conversation. I'm joined with Gino Wickman, who's a lifelong entrepreneur, the creator of EOS Entrepreneurial Operating System. He's delivered over 2,000 sessions for more than 135 companies, helping them implement EOS. He's an award-winning author with books selling in the millions and counting. He's founded EOS worldwide with a team of over 800 EOS implementers, impacting over 250,000 companies using EOS tools. And what really lights me up about this incredible human you're about to hear from is the beautiful and transparent, dynamic person that he is, and that he's willing to share his true self with the world, including his newest release, Shine, a book that we're going to get into today about helping driven entrepreneurs in the ways that we need it most, going inside and mastering our inner worlds to create the freedom that we desire. Gino, welcome to the show. It is so good to have you here.
Chelsea, thanks so much for that introduction. I am so looking forward to this, and I hope we will make a huge impact on a lot of people out there.
We will. I'm sure of it. You already are. Gino, last year I felt a strong impression that this conversation was one that needed to be had, but not only had, shared. And what originally prompted that was I was in deep thought about how I could support more increase with the clients that I had, particularly driven leaders and entrepreneurs who were seeking an added measure of connection and an increase in the energy of their organizations. And in studying the things that you've shared and listening to you and in my own experiences, what I know to be true is that in order to be able to connect with people at the deepest level and contribute to an environment that supports creative and warm and inspiring energy, whether that's in a business or in our own homes, we can only give as much as we have. So if I may, I'd love to just jump right into the deep end here. And you're definitely not a stranger to our audience, but I'd love to invite you to share your background in relation to the turning point where you decided to engage in or engage more deeply in a different type of personal journey.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, before we go way into the deep end, I'm going to start very surface because I think the context is so important for how deep we're about to go. And I'm looking forward to this because I have a feeling we're going to go pretty deep, but you're the gauge on that. So we're going to go as deep as you want to go. But the context is really important from a standpoint of, I am an entrepreneur who helps entrepreneurs. I am obsessed about helping entrepreneurs, and I've been doing that for 30 years plus. And what's important in this context is to understand there are 5 pieces of content I've created in the world, and you touched on them in that introduction, but just very quickly, number 1 is entrepreneurial leap, and that's for anybody who thinks they're an entrepreneur, wants to take a leap, or early stage entrepreneurs. There's then rocket fuel for that visionary entrepreneur that wants to find their integrator counterpart and take the business to the next level. Third piece of content is EOS and traction, and that's for when they want to run their business like a Swiss watch. Then there's EOS Life, the 4th piece of content for when they want to live their ideal life. And then there's the 5th piece of content, Shine, which is what we're about to talk about. The reason I want to start there is what's really important is, as I keep saying, the context, because what I just described is the entrepreneurial climb. And so that content meets an entrepreneur wherever they are. And that's from scratching their head, trying to decide whether they're going to start a business, all the way to the day they get to the top of the mountain, achieve everything they set out to do, and realize it's not all it was meant to be in terms of filling them up. And so how to feel fulfilled as an entrepreneur. And so every entrepreneur is somewhere on that climb. With that said, I share that visual because the climb is typically focused on outer world success. When you get to the top of the mountain and shine and looking inward, it's all about inner world success. And for most, It's when they get to the top of the mountain, they start looking inside. And what I'm trying to do is get these entrepreneurs to start looking inside earlier in their journey, earlier in the climb. And that's why I'm so excited about this podcast, because that's what we're going to help them do. So contextually, there's the big picture. How I ended up writing a book called Shine, and what we're about to talk about is I am all of that content. I am those 5 pieces of content. We teach what we needed the most. I've lived and breathed every word and everything I've created. And it happened for me at 52 years old after selling EOS worldwide at 50. There I was 2 years after selling, basking in my glory, feeling like everything was perfect, celebrating my success, and the universe pulled out a 2x4 and hit me over the head. And it was my wake-up call. My soul was pinged that it's time to look inward, because all of the pain and trauma from my past that I had so masterfully pushed down and built an armor suit to protect myself, it all just came crashing down, or came up, or however you want to look at it. But it was time to just really look inside. And this last 3 to 4 years have been profound, led to writing that book. And it's been quite a journey. And so now I'm sharing it with the world in the hopes to help other driven entrepreneurs look inward and really find inner peace and join me on this journey. So if you would have told me 5 years ago we'd be having this conversation, I would have told you you're crazy. And now I just love this conversation. So hopefully, there's the long answer to your question to set the stage, but hopefully that answers your question.
So when you say the world hit you with a 2x4, letting you know you needed to do some additional work, I think there's a lot of people that, myself included, that have felt something similar. Was that, your garden variety just nudges here and there, or was that an event? Is that something that you can expand on?
Yeah, for sure. So it's a little bit longer answer, but when I look back, I realized I started looking inward at around age 30. And so I'm 57 now. And so this goes back 27 years ago. And I described it as my soul getting pinged for the first time. And at the time, I think I read Celestine Prophecies. A couple other things were pinging me, but it was like just this awareness that happened. And then, so shoot forward over the 27 years, I would just do different things to kind of go inside. I would call it shedding layers. And that's what I still call it to this day. And so you'll hear that terminology come up a lot. But what I found is whenever I would shed a layer, which was just kind of confronting something inside of me, there would be tears, I would shed it, it would feel great after, and I shed a layer. Well, that went on for, let's say, till 52, 22 years. What happened 2 years after selling the business at 52 is it was, in the past, each shed was, relatively painful, relatively emotional, relatively bringing something up. But this was like a massive bringing up. And so it just kind of all happened at one time. And maybe the previous 22 years was preparing me for this big one. But this big one was just really looking inside and really reflecting on my life and really addressing pain and trauma that I actually wore as a badge of honor. I would figure out how to make it a thing, as opposed to really see it for what it was and experience the pain, and so I look back, and the pain and trauma that I experienced, it was around 15 when I started drinking that I learned how to numb it and create this cool guy, tough guy persona that served me very well in the outer world. It was seeing all of that and then shedding all of that. And that was through a couple key things that prompted it. Letting Go by David Hawkins. That book was really profound. Michael Singer's book, Untethered Soul, was in that same time frame, and that was a bit profound. I decided to get some therapy. I've done therapy 2 times prior, but I never really wanted to be fully honest with myself. And this time around, I decided to. And then I did some plant medicine, and that really kind of opened me up. But it was a little bit of everything, so it wasn't this one thing, but just something called me to start looking inside, because I could just feel the pain. I could just feel it. And I wanted it to come out, come up, go away. And it just led me on a path, but it was in a very short period of time. And so to your question, it kind of was an event, but that event included a whole bunch of, parts and pieces and experiences.
And I really appreciate you sharing that because I've had an exit too, and that's something that I think that a lot of people who have exited can relate to, in the sense that you have something that you invest your heart, your soul, a lot of your waking hours, your meditations, everything's, designed around building this really beautiful thing, and it's alive, it's breathing, it's living, and then you exit, and all of a sudden your phone doesn't ring, and you're not inundated with emails, and you have freedom of time, and it's actually very jarring, and it is a moment where a lot of us ask some really serious, deep personal questions. And so I really appreciate you shedding light on that because I don't think it's talked about enough.
Yeah, and I describe it as you just have to create space. Your body knows what to do. Your soul is knocking. Your true self wants out, and when you create space, and you're exactly right, that's exactly what happened. I sold the business. In other words, it could not have been a more perfect sale in the way that I structured it. I was free from the business the day that I sold. I was able to start pursuing my new passions, but I had time and space, and exactly in that time and space, I don't know how it all works in the master plan, but that was the time for it all to come up and me to confront it and learn a whole bunch of stuff about myself.
Okay, so you're in this learning mode, and in Shine, you talk about stillness. I'm going to jump all around here because this is relevant
Yeah,
to what we're talking
yeah.
about. But we're in this world where we have an incredible number of stimuli, and we're accustomed to a lack of stillness, both inside and out. But you talk about the importance of stillness and the different things we can do to get into that space. Anything you
Mhm.
want to share on that topic?
Yeah, for sure. And again, I'm always a kind of a context fanatic here. So I gave you the big context. Now I'm going to give you kind of the next layer of context because now we're into that fifth piece of content. We're talking about the book Shine. Within the book Shine, there are two parts to the book. There's the 3 discoveries for freeing your true self, and there's the 10 disciplines for maximizing your energy, impact, and inner peace. And the only reason I bring that up is I want to anchor wherever your question comes up, I want to anchor it in the content because hopefully your listeners will read the book, get motivated by what we're about to talk about, want to go on this journey. Whether they do or not, I want to anchor it in the content, or at least they can refer to find the content. And so you're asking about stillness and creating space, which is a great place to go with where we are. Well, one of the disciplines is called Be Still. And there are 10 disciplines total. And what the disciplines do is they create a platform, a foundation to create time and space in your life to do this inner work while also maximizing your outer world. And so, stillness, I wrote the book with my co author, Rob Dubay. And so, we offer up 3 forms of stillness. So, there's meditation, contemplation, journaling, and prayer. And so it's different for everyone. And I could give you 10 more. Can't think of them all right now, but the point is those 4 are the most common you will hear about in the way of stillness. And the idea is to figure out your perfect formula for stillness because we're all different and you can do a combination. And so for me, most of the time it's about meditation. I will meditate 3 to 5 times a week, but I also do a bit of contemplation, also like journaling. So it's different for all of us, and that will also change. It's not as if I, meditate every day for 20 straight years. So it's okay to mix it up. And when I was given permission to do that it was about probably 12 years ago, it was so freeing. So I just kind of go with what I'm drawn to do with my stillness practice, and it's quite profound. But those are the 4, and that's the long answer to your question.
I love that. And will you talk a little bit more about meditation? This is a topic that's come up on recent podcast episodes. And what I hear a lot from, friends or clients is, Chelsea, I don't have time to journal. I don't have time to meditate or do breath work or anything else on a daily basis. But could you talk about meditation and what that could look like? Because I think there's this misunderstanding that there's one right way or that you need to see geometric shapes when you close your eyes or have some sort of, regular system in place. What is your take on it?
Yeah, I have a few things to share there. And I'm trying. There's 2 things I want to say, and I'm deciding which order I want to say these because, and I think I think the best way to do this is, I mentioned plant medicine, right? And there's something I want to tie to meditation that has been very profound for me and a discovery that I made. And so, it was actually my doctor when I was describing what I was experiencing at that, at age 52, he was the one that suggested plant medicine to me. And so I did that, and it was very profound. But what I learned is, all it simply does is it turns off your ego for 2 to 4 hours. Okay. And so you have this beautiful opportunity to see life without your ego. And it's a really beautiful place. And your soul and your true self is completely free. So with that, I always, when I bring this up, I want to give a disclaimer because, it's a shit show out there with plant medicine, especially with entrepreneurs, and so it does as much damage as good. And so I can't help but say, if you ever consider it, please do it where it's in a clinical setting and not a recreational setting. Please make sure there's integration around it, because all the study shows is it's net neutral for most. They do it, they have this experience, and 2 years later, they're the same person. So I just always like to share that disclaimer. But the point is, what I learned is I can get to the exact same place in meditation. And my meditations are more profound than that experience. But what that experience did was just showed me, because what I realized is that experience I had with plant medicine, that meditative state, I could think back to about 5 times in my life when I got there. And I think I was 7, and another, I think I was like 12 years old, and another at 25 and maybe 32. But the point is, you can get to that place. And the idea with meditation is to be in stillness and just let your ego subside. That's really what it's about. And then what happens is a multitude of things. A lot of times it's nothing. So everybody that's looking for the fireworks and the geometric shapes and the colors and the words and the this and that, that's not always going to happen. And if you go in with that expectation, it's going to be really tough. The other thing that goes on is, for a driven entrepreneur, it is really hard to stop and just sit in silence. But what I believe and what I've learned is that for the ones that struggle, it's like what happened to me at 52. What your soul, if you will sit in stillness, and we urge you to start with 10 minutes. Don't try a 60-minute meditation. Don't try 30 minutes. Just start with 10. But what happens when you sit in stillness, your soul is going to start knocking. Your true self is going to start knocking. And that gets so scary and so uncomfortable, they tap out. They go, oh, I can't do this. I can't. That's not what's really going on. It's like you created space and the truth is about to come up and they run from it. Okay. So again, just my experience with saying that. The idea is to sit in stillness, and stuff will come up. And so I lovingly and jokingly like to say stuff comes up and stuff comes down. So you get downloads, and that's the shapes and the colors and the words and the this and the that. Or things come up, which means pain is going to come up and out. And meditation is a great opportunity to shed some stuff. But nonetheless, at a bare minimum, if you will commit to, ultimately what we teach and urge is 30 minutes every day of stillness. But start with 10, work your way up. At a minimum, to sit in stillness for 30 minutes, whether there are fireworks or not, let's pretend nothing comes up or down. The benefit to your central nervous system, your clarity, your health, just calming down as a driven entrepreneur who goes 150 miles an hour every day, to just stop and let your soul catch up is so profound and helpful. Don't look for anything else. Stuff will probably happen, but have no expectation. And just the rest that your central nervous system and your body so desperately needs are all the benefits you'll ever need to worry about.
You said a word in there that I think is so important that I want to emphasize here before moving on. You mentioned integration. And whenever we're doing deep work on ourselves, whether that's plant medicine or inner child work or just sitting in stillness, can you talk about the importance of an intention, going into that with intention?
Yeah, but you keep going, therapy and all of it, any kind of this work, when you're willing to look inside, integration is just one of many words, but you got to do the work. You got to commit to it. So thinking that going to therapy for that hour is the thing that's going to change you, you're sadly mistaken. Doing the plant medicine journey is the thing that's going to change you. The meditation, it's dealing with the stuff that comes up. It's doing the work around it. It's really confronting it and spending time. And so integration just simply means what you came out of there with, spend some time with it. Intention is a little bit different, so intention, I, I can't speak intelligently about that word because maybe I have some biases. It's a very faddish, woo woo, new age word. If we just look back in the last 10 to 20 years, okay, but you can also tie that to expectation, and then have a conversation with a spiritual person about intention and expectation. Well, you're not allowed to have expectations. Well, isn't an intention kind of anyway? I don't want to go there, but I'm just trying to make a point. So what I believe what it comes to you when it's time for it to come to you. And so for what that is worth. Now, with that said, in doing these things, I believe it is good to have intention, healthy to have intention. So be careful not to get too rigid with what I'm saying, but I'm not sure you have to go into all of that every time with an intention. And I think it's okay to go into that sometimes with no intention and just let whatever's going to come up or let what's going to happen. So for that's worth. It's like there was a plant medicine, the way I try to think of the way that it was said or advised, but it talked about how you never get the journey you want, but you get the journey you need. So it's like, where does intention play into that? So it's for what that's worth.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And where I was going with that was, you were saying in relation to plant medicine, you were like, it can do just as much harm as good. And so I was thinking, going into that with a question, what do I need to learn? What is most important for me to know at this time? What energies are blocked in my body? Those types of things. But what I love that you said at the end there was no intention, just being a receiver of the experience. That is so, so powerful. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And then I just want to add something else, because this is where that word, and this, and I already disclosed, this is my bias. So please, take this with a grain of salt. But now all of a sudden, because this is where, it creates a little bit of a mind fuck but with contemplation, which is one of the 4 forms of stillness, contemplation very much has an intention. Because when you contemplate, you're contemplating on something, if it's that form of thoughtful contemplation, like trying to solve a really big issue that you're dealing with, or really kind of analyzing something. And then prayer, there's intention in prayer as well, which is another form of stillness. So this is where it gets a little, twisty and turny and challenging. And to go into a meditation and say, what is it that I need to see today? That's intention, but there's also no real expectation around. So this is where it gets a little confusing. And then, like I said, just a little mind bending. So you got to play with that yourself and decide what the best approach is for you. Because when I've gone into meditations with no intention, those have been some of my most profound experiences, because with everything I have going on, the right thing just seems to bubble to the surface. And then just to give you one example of one of the most profound things that happened is there's an exercise, I share it in the book Shine, and I do it with audiences, and it's very profound, but it happened to me in a meditation. And so it turned into, for lack of a better term, a tool I use with clients. And it's an exercise where I have you, picture your whole life and then remove everything from your life. And there you are with nothing. The business is gone, the money's gone, the people gone, everything is gone. It's just little old you. And how do you feel? Well, that happened to me in a meditation where literally everything in my life went away, and it was all out there. It's like I could see it in the distance all around me, but it was just little old me sitting there. And it was very profound, because that's when you come to meet you. And that's really what is all about. So now you met you. There you are. None of that stuff that you're attached to and you're defined by. Who are you really? And that's the good stuff. That's your true self.
Yeah, I remember when I read that, and I used that in one of my meditations, actually multiple meditations. And it's just such a powerful experience to help identify, where am I attached, or where is there more influence than is appropriate or self-aligned. It's very powerful. I definitely
Yeah.
recommend that when people read the book, they try it, because I definitely had
Appreciate
an
that.
impact
Yeah.
on
And so I didn't go into that meditation saying, hey, give me a tool that I'm going to be using for the next 30 years with clients. It just came
me.
up. That's my point. There was no intention around that coming up. The right thing came up at the right time. That seems to be helping a lot of people, and especially myself.
Yeah, thank you. And you described the 10 disciplines a second ago, which we're going to talk through a few, but I just want to emphasize for listeners that my understanding is, at least, that they're intended to work together to create a beautiful
Mm-hmm.
impact, not really a buffet. They're intended to work together, doing all of them. But in that section, you discussed the importance of listening to our bodies. And you stated that our body is our best friend on earth. And you talk about identifying blocked energy. Can you expand on how you essentially team up with your body as your best friend?
Yeah. So I'll say a couple of things there. First, addressing your point about the 10 disciplines, yes, they all work together. They absolutely have a synergistic effect. They can and do stand on their own if you only implement one in your life, but you're just not going to get the maximum benefit in terms of
Right.
everything we're talking about. So, absolutely, you'll get more benefit. You know, so those 10 added together equal 100, where one on their own, one plus one is, or one, if that makes sense. So, that's the first point. The second point is when you talk about, listening to our bodies, energy blocks, things like that, kind of where you're going there, there's two places I want to go because like I talked about in the context, there are the 3 discoveries to free your true self, part 1 of the book, and then the 10 disciplines as we just talked about, second half of the book. Well, the second discovery gets to your question, so I want to go there, but then also point out that there are a few places within the 10 disciplines that this will happen. And so, know thyself is a discipline where this will happen. Being still is a place where this will happen. Actually, believe it or not, don't do $25 an hour work. It happens when you understand how to correlate that to energy, because you need to also let go of energy that's dragging you down. So what my point is, what we're about to talk about in answering your question shows up through multiple disciplines. And so I'd love to just go right to discovery 2 to really hit home what you're talking about and where it'll illustrate how the magic happens. With saying that, I just want to give a little bit of context there, which is the fact that there are 3 discoveries, and they're called the 3 discoveries to free your true self. I just want to share what they quickly are, and then we'll go into number 2, because the first discovery, as a driven entrepreneur out there, is to discover that you are driven. And so we call the discovery I Am Driven, because you're reading that. And it's to understand the blessing and the curse that it is to be driven. Second discovery is to understand that all decisions are made out of love or fear, which we're going to talk about that in just a second. And then the third discovery is to discover and realize that it is possible to be driven and have peace. And so now, going back to your question in discovery number 2, all decisions are made out of love or fear. I'm going to do a really fast context on number 2, and then I want to come right back to your question. I almost would like you to re-ask it, because my really long answer to your question, we may have lost a few people, and my deep apologies. But the real quick context in this one is to understand that all decisions are made out of love or fear. And when we say decisions, that's thoughts, feelings, emotions, and decisions. And love, fear, AKA, really means love is your true self or soul, and fear is your ego. And so when you understand all decisions are coming from either your true self or your ego, it's very powerful. And when you have that clarity, you could then drill down into understanding how your ego is protecting and burying your true self, how everything is energy, how these are just simply blocks. And when you release the block through awareness, you all of a sudden shift from fear-based to love-based decisions. So there's the fast version. Would you mind re-asking your question so that we can really surgically strike the answer to this question?
Yes, and that was a really beautiful way to set us up for it. But you talk about our bodies being, quote, our best friend on earth, and identifying blocked energy and the importance of that. So I was asking, how do you utilize that, teaming up with your body as your best friend?
Perfect. Okay, so now with saying that, I have to say this. I don't remember writing Our Body is Our Best Friend on Earth. So I don't know if that's another book you read, or the editor or Rob Dubay, my co-author, slipped that in the last pass before I did my final edit. But
Gosh,
with
maybe it
that
was
said,
my note, Gino. Maybe it was my
maybe,
interpretation.
but
Apologies.
here's the beauty. That is exactly what I'm saying. I mean, that's what the whole book is saying. I just don't remember typing those words. Okay. So with saying that, our body is our best friend. You know, and so there's a great book, The Body Keeps the Score, which I'm assuming you're familiar
Hmm.
with. But what it
Yeah.
talks about is, everything is trapped in our body. Our body knows. Our body is screaming to tell us. That's that point about when we create stillness, stuff will come up. Another exercise we have people do is just think about traumatic situations in life and pick one. We always urge them to pick the easiest one, like the lightest one, the one that has less emotion around it, and sit with it. And what we do is take them through an exercise that says, okay, think about it. Where are you feeling in your body? Because you always feel it somewhere in your body, head to toe. Okay, and if it were a shape, what shape? And if it were a color, what color? Now focus on the location, the shape, the color, and the sensation, and then they process it and it literally dissipates, sometimes in 30 seconds, sometimes unfortunately in 30 days. It all depends on the magnitude of the trauma. But the point is that's your body telling you. There are no words that can explain that power, but that is your body, this energetic body that's pure energy, vibrating all the time, saying, here's this thing that you've been hanging on to that you must let go of because it's holding you back. And your ego's hanging on so tight and is trying to protect you from ever feeling that pain again. So it thinks it's doing good. It's really trying to help, but it's not helping. And so when you shed whatever the root of that thing is, and you shed that block in your body, and you don't even always need to know what it is, but you've got to get it out of you. And you can do the home study course on how to do that. Like you can sit in meditation and process a block. Sometimes you need something more. You might need therapy. We offer 30 ways to shed layers and remove blocks in Shine. But you can do this yourself, and that may piss off many therapists out there, but you can do this yourself. Our body knows what to do if we will shut up and just listen to it. So how did you say it? Because I love the way you said it, and I don't think that's in the book that way, but how did you say it?
Okay. I said our body is our best friend on earth. So
Yeah,
perhaps
there
that,
you go.
yeah, I'll share my notes with you later. That was what I titled the section. I assumed it came from you. I guess it came from me, but I'm glad that we worked together on that.
Beautiful. Put a TM on that. I don't think it's in the book. It may be, but I don't think it is. So throw a TM on that for yourself. It's beautifully said, and it's 100% true.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Gino, and I appreciate your grace on that. Contrasting that just a little bit I think it was in the interview after the audio version of the book, you had made some comments about no sensation, a calm, an absence of sensation being an indicator. Can you talk more about that? Because I think sometimes going back to stillness being, something we're not familiar with or even scary, a nothingness can be really confusing for people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and this was taught to me, and I found it very profound. It was such an aha moment. And it's, again, back to this whole decisions are made out of love or fear, your true self or your ego, right? And what happened was I was sharing with somebody about an opportunity I was excited about. It was a business opportunity and a big decision needed to be made around it. And I explained how I felt so excited, I knew it was the right decision. And what he said is, well, actually, when it's the right decision, there will be no sensation, a nothingness. And then someone else describes it. We write all this in the book, but described it as a knowing. Okay, so a nothingness, no sensation, a knowing. And so when your true self is communicating with you and it's the right decision, i.e., your soul, your spirit, whatever word you use, you get to use whatever word you want. Okay, we're all different. But when your intuition is right, soul, true self, whatever word, there is no sensation. It's just literally a nothingness, a knowingness. And so all those other sensations are coming from some form of your ego, wanting to take advantage of the opportunity because it's going to make you feel more successful, to make you hide from that shame even more that you don't want to address, or something you're truly afraid of, and making this decision will make you less afraid. Well, that's not a good reason to do it. So that's when your soul is speaking to you, it's a nothingness, it's a knowing, there's no sensation.
Thank you for explaining that. And, earlier you said everything is energy. And in the book, you talk about us being balls of energy. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, and that's why I took you to this context, because everything you're asking now, we're in that second discovery for freeing your true self. All decisions are made out of love or fear. So what we teach is these four levels. So you're like taking the elevator down four levels to go to the roots of why you're making fear-based decisions. And so what you're touching on now is the second level, and getting into three here. We've touched on that, but I'll explain this context again so that everybody has the full story. And so, again, just my humble opinion. But when you understand this powerful awareness that all decisions are made out of love or fear, and then again, true self and ego, you realize that your true self is trapped. Your ego has it hijacked for good reason. Our ego is just here to protect us. It thinks it's protecting us. And so what you realize is the prison that your true self is in. Again, they're called the three discoveries for freeing your true self. And that's what we're all about. So with that clarity, now you realize that we take you down to the first level. So the elevator's going down a level. And that first level is to understand your true self is in there. It's just this awareness you have to understand. Inside of your body, your true self is in there and it wants out. And you don't even realize it's trapped. You have yourself fooled in most cases, okay? That's just my experience. And what you start to understand is the cocoon that your ego has built around you. You can call that protective layers. You can call that a structure. When I saw my ego structure, this goes back 4 years ago, I was disgusted. It was masterful. My ego thought 20 steps ahead. And anytime you were going to hit my pain, I could head you off in 3 moves, through humor, distraction, whatever it was. If you watch people, it's so fascinating, their ego structure working, but it was so gross. I saw the 20 layers in the structure and it was masterful. Or you can look at it as an armor suit, or you can look at it as a block of marble that you're trapped in. And so the whole idea is you got to chip away the marble, you got to lower the layers, you got to take down the structure, because your true self is in there. Now, once you know your true self is in there and it's trapped behind that cocoon, we take the elevator down another level. And this is then the reality and the awareness and the understanding that we are all pure energy. Okay, and so this is where it starts to get a little freaky, a little heady, a little woo-woo. This is where I lose half the audience. But it's scientific now. There's no arguing with this. Google it. We are all pure energy. I mean, if you can follow and understand how it works, that we're particles that turn into atoms, that turn into molecules, that turn into cells, that turn into human beings, you cannot argue with this. We are energy and we vibrate. And we beings, we just happen to be dense energy. And so you can touch us, feel us, all that good stuff. But it's this understanding that we are pure energy. With understanding that we are pure energy, then you realize some of us burn very bright and some of us don't burn bright. And this is what I loved about Letting Go, David Hawkins' book, because he created a scale of consciousness where he shows a scale of 0 to 1,000. And what he's showing us is how high we vibrate or don't. And I just want to read these words so that I get them right, because this will help. And he talks about how at the lowest level of vibration, these are things like, just bear with me 1 second, shame and guilt and fear. And at the highest level of vibration, these are things like peace and enlightenment and love. And so every one of us human beings are somewhere on that scale. And the ones that shine bright are vibrating very high. The ones that don't shine so bright, vibrating low. And the ones that aren't shining as bright and are vibrating low, there's just blocked energy in there. Hold that thought, because that's the third level down, but it's starting by understanding, all right, I'm energy, I vibrate, how high am I vibrating? And then a little tangent to that is, whatever level you're vibrating at, that's what you're attracting in your life. And so if you're pure walking shame, guilt, and anger, you're going to attract shame, guilt, and anger. We attract what we're putting out. We attract what we vibrate. Now all of a sudden you understand that. We take the elevator down to the third level, and that is blocked energy. It's the blocked energy levels. Understand that you have blocked energy in you, probably. If you're Jesus Christ, Buddha, if you're enlightened, you're good. But most of us aren't enlightened. Okay, so we have blocked energy. And so just understanding the blocked energy level and that you can remove the blocks. And so simply put, something happened to you and you held on to it in your life and you're holding on to it and your ego is trying to protect you from it. That's the stuff we talked about in stillness and meditation. When you create space, that stuff wants to come out. That's your body telling you. Your wonderful quote that you gave a minute ago. That's your body telling you. And that's the process. I gave 2 examples of how you shed that. There are 30 ways we give you in the book, but once you understand that, you just need to remove all the blocks. And every time you remove a block, you vibrate a little higher, and a higher, and then higher. And then we take it down to the 4th level. Final floor, level 4, is awareness, the awareness level, and it's about just being aware. So if you just go forward from this day and just be aware of all of your decisions, feelings, emotions, and thoughts. And are they love-based or fear-based? And you're going to find most human beings, 95% of them are fear-based, maybe 99. But if you can just make a 10% shift, start making more love-based decisions through this awareness, it's like a Richter scale. It's going to transform your life. And then you shed one thing, more love-based decisions, shed another, shed another, shed another. And then you, from there, you shoot back up. So once you're aware and you realize, wow, this is fear-based, you then move up to level 3, shed that block. That moves you up to level 2. You shine brighter, vibrate higher. Then you move up to level 1, which is to free that ego. Someday it dissolves. You become good friends with it. It sits over here in the passenger seat. It's not running the show. And your true self is driving the car and leading the way. And that's the shortest way I can answer your question. So hopefully that made some semblance of sense.
It was the perfect visual, and I really appreciate you taking us through that exercise there. You know, you described it in a way that illuminates that it's not intended to be a light switch, something you do once and now it's on until you turn it off. It's actually probably a process that's going to take place. In fact, I recall you talking about ebbs and flows, and I think that's so relevant to this piece of the conversation. And you also mentioned awareness, and one of the questions, self-awareness questions that I remember you mentioning in that interview post the audiobook was when you're in a social situation and you notice yourself deviating from being your true self. And this really just hit me hard. You said, "Why am I ending myself for this particular person?" Anything you want to add to or expand on that?
Well, yeah, there's a story that I share, and ironically, this happened at 30 years old. So this could be all around when I first got pinged, you know. So that that might be what the trigger to all of this was, or the starting point. And so it was my 30th birthday. My wife threw me a surprise birthday party. I walk into the house. There's 100 sets of eyeballs yell surprise, and I look around this room, and there's 6 factions of my life around the room. And so there's my business partners, there's my employees, there's my high school friends, there's my new friends, there's my family, there's my wife's family. And I look around the room and I realize I'm 6 different people to these 6 factions. And I said to myself, who am I going to be today? And I was so like bummed with myself that I was a chameleon in life. I was 6 different people. And I realized how exhausting it was. And I realized from this day forward, I'm just going to be me. And so the point that you're asking and saying there is it's where you can't be 6 people. So I'm somewhere in there is me, and that's where I'm sacrificing myself for some other person, not being myself, draining my energy for all the wrong reasons. And so does that indirectly answer your question? But because re-ask it if I'm not hitting it right on the bullseye.
Yeah, I think in relation to our previous conversation about the different levels, and you mentioned awareness, where I was going with that was just the opportunity we have to check in with our motives, check in with ourselves, and find out, is this a fear-based decision? Is this a love-based decision? Is this me? Is this my energy, or is this somebody else's energy?
Mm-hmm.
And really uncovering, not necessarily, and not at all to judge why we're doing something, but just to understand, why am I doing this in this situation? What is my ego trying to protect me from? Because it's that understanding that we're really needing to solve for rather than cover up the situation.
Yeah, and what I hope, because I feel like I'm answering the question and I'm giving this context, because I'll drill down a little more on it, because it's such a profound point where there I was looking at these 6 factions and being 6 different people. and realizing that's exhausting. I only want to be me. I'm going to be me from now on. Number one, if you really think about it, if at that moment I knew how to just fully be me, shed my ego, there would be ramifications. There would be fallout. Some of those people are going away forever because they like the fake Gino. They like the pretend Gino. They like that Gino, this Gino. Well, I want to be this Gino. I want to be the true self Gino. So there's going to be ramifications, but also, again, every time I'm bending, so we can take it to your example or 1,000 other examples, take it to today in business. I've got to make a decision, or I got to have a tough conversation with an employee or a friend or a family member. I got to do it from my soul. I got to do it from my true self. And if I am any one of those 6 people to try and somehow, I don't know, make them feel better, me feel better, those are all the wrong reasons. I just got to be me. And there are ramifications. So we resist it because it's so fearful, because you're going to lose people in your life when you start being your true self. And that's typically where it ends for most people. It's like, all right, I'm not willing to lose that person, so I'm going to be this phony person for the rest of my life and just unfortunately not maximize my energy for the next 30 years. And I said it that crude to make a point. It's scary stuff, but it's so, so powerful.
And I think we've all been there or soon will be. And it's one of those situations where either you're expending an incredible amount of energy to maintain relationships that aren't genuine, or you're refusing to see that they're not genuine. But there's something there. And when we're ready, I believe it makes itself available for us to see again. And it's
For
really
sure.
important work to do.
Yeah, and I want to go back to something you said, if I may, because it's like sitting with me. It's so important to say, and again, we write this in the book as well, and that is, what I believe with those 4 levels I just shared with you in the elevator. And you mentioned something where you said, it's not a light switch, and for 99.9999% of the population, it's not a light switch. But what I believe with every ounce of my being, because I'm hoping one of you are out there right now listening to this podcast episode, but there are people, very few, that will get that concept and literally, I'm snapping my fingers, and the snap of a finger, shed everything and fully be their true selves, i.e. enlightened. And I know that, and like within seconds, but unfortunately, it's going to be like 1 in 10,000. And that's the person that had the plant medicine journey that like changed their life overnight. That's the one that went to therapy and had an aha moment in that session. But it's so few. But once you get, it's such a simple premise, and it's indescribable with words. But when you understand, here I am, this energy ball, and I've got this dark energy I'm hanging on to for some God knows, it like doesn't even make sense why I'm hanging on. And I can release it all and just be pure, bright, white energy and vibrate high. Why on earth would I not want that? And whew, so that's what's going to happen for 1 in 10,000. And then the other 9,999 of us, unfortunately, it's not a light switch. And it'll take, a few weeks, a few months, a few quarters, a few years, a few decades. It's going to be different for everybody. But I've had a pretty profound 3 to 4 years. So my journey was about 3 to 4, and I don't even know where I am. I don't know if I'm 1% of the way there or 99% of the way there. So I'm on this journey with everybody out there and having a blast with it.
Well, it's an incredible journey, and I really appreciate you sharing it with us. And we've covered so much. I wondered, before we close out, if I could ask you something else. I heard you make a recommendation, and it was an exercise that you went through because you just mentioned therapy. So it prompted me to think of this. But you recommend writing down your life story, everything that's happened to you, everything you've been through, and then sharing it with a trusted person, which is something similar. It's a recommendation we see in therapy. We see it in different recovery programs. We see it in different spiritual programs. That might sound really scary to a lot of people. But you said when you say it, it goes away. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I'll share 2 things, because there's 2 ways that I've done it and suggest it. Lots of ways, like you said, it's prescribed many different ways. But for me, what's really important is it's not your life story. What I call it, and what we call it in this book with my co-author, Rob Dubay, is your inner story, is telling your inner story. because most driven entrepreneurs are so masterful at telling their outer story. Press the hell out of all of us, but yeah. So anyways, they're great at that. What I'm saying is stop. And so in this book, I start the book by telling both my outer story and inner story, so I do all my bragging and then I share all my baggage, so it's your inner story. So it's say how you really feel inside and why that is and what caused all of that, and share the embarrassing, horrible shit, but not with the world, with one person and love and trust. Okay. And so for some reason, I am called to tell the world mine. It's not fun, but I'm called to, and so I do, and it can be challenging at times. But I'm saying just with one person, because when I told my wife my inner story for the first time at 35, I've known her since I was 17. It took me 18 years to tell it to her. I thought she was going to run for the hills, and she only loved me more, So it's the inner story, not your story, okay? And then that's one way to say it. The other way is this therapist that I engaged later on at 52. He took me through a process, and he said, list everything in your life that you're ashamed of, was embarrassing, you're sorry for, that people did to you. So just all the horrible, ugly stuff. I wrote 60 things, somewhere between 50 and 60 things. And then he and I went through every single one of those things. It was brutal, but it was so powerful because I saw all the ties to how I created this structure that I created, and I could chase it back to all that, and I was able to let each thing go by forgiving someone else, forgiving myself, understanding why it happened, and just letting it go. Again, the idea is to let it go. It happened. And then he had this great saying. He says, do you know why it happened? I said, why? He said, because it happened. And when you get that, you are enlightened, because you think it happened to you. Now there's the new phrase, it happened for you. Again, I'm not knocking all these phrases, but when you get that, you see life as it is, and that the shit just happened. It happened because it happened. Stop attaching so much meaning to it. Stop having it define your whole life. Acknowledge it, understand it, see what it's doing to you, and let the frickin' thing go. You'll be 1,000 pounds lighter, and you'll vibrate higher. So anyway, I didn't even know what your question was. I'm just rambling now, so I'm going to stop.
No, I like that. Full disclosure, I think I'm going to put that in one of my workblocks, and we're going to start at the end. It's going to say, do you know why it happened? Because it happened, and then 50 lines.
You're here. Michael Blomsterberg, he has a book called, what is this book called? But that's his quote. And, it's bumming me out that I can't think of the name of it. Let me see if it's right here behind me. Put it in the show notes for me, since I'm going to forget it. But
you bet.
I can't find it fast enough. It begins with me.
Okay. Got it. Gino, this has been a beautiful, beautiful conversation. Is there anything else you'd like to add to it before we close out?
Well, what I would love to share is where to get free resources, okay? So our website is the10disciplines.com, and that's where you will find all things shine and the 3 discoveries and the 10 disciplines. But you can get a free chapter of the book, the first 27 pages, to see if that sucks you in, and then you can certainly buy the book there. We have an assessment called the True Self Assessment, which is a free assessment you take, and it will tell you how free your true self really is to start you on the journey. But then the stuff you can pay for is we have a self-study, we have a group coaching, we have a mastermind. So, go as far down the rabbit hole as you want, but I strongly urge you to please implement these 10 disciplines in your life.
Yes, and I second that. The book is just a beautiful work, and I strongly recommend it as well. So, Gino, thank you for being you, and thank you for sharing your journey and your experiences. I've been impacted, and I know that there are so many people who find strength and courage to bet on themselves by learning from what you've shared. So this has been really beautiful.
Thank you. Had a blast, Chelsea. Thanks.
I appreciate you joining me for today's episode. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show to help you create the life you truly desire.